Hey guys, welcome back to Cool Bike Projects. This is Rusty. I'm rocking a new camera today, so we're testing a few things out. Hopefully the autofocus stays on me. So today in this episode, we are working on a pretty unusual full suspension bike from 1993. This is a Trek 9200, and this was a high-priced bike back in the day. This bike is a little bit unusual. For its time, it had an air shock in the front as well as a rear Risi racing shock. Standard for the bike at the time was fully integrated Shimano LX shifters, hubs, an upgraded rear derailleur to an XT. Even the crankset and the front derailleur was all LX. And in those days, that was kind of the running game for a racing bike. Now, again, 93, this predates a lot of things. So you'll notice that on the rear suspension side of things, the rocker arm literally has a foam dampener because the compression and the rebound was such that it would actually make a rattle noise. And so the foam in the back would help to eliminate the up kick when the bike would return. On the back end, we have a unique upgrade. This is a Paul branded early version of a V-brake. Pretty cool. So we're going to be replacing a few things, tires, cables, tubes, and see if we can't get this bike working again. And other than the length of the stem here, we may keep this original cockpit just to try out what was the full suspension bike riding like back in 1993. So after disassembling the bike, we came across a few more interesting issues. The Paul branded brakes, the pivot is not working correctly, and I'm trying to find a part for it so I can keep on using this. Everything else, including the air fork, has a lot of dust and needs to be cleaned thoroughly. So the next step for us is going to be putting everything into a little bit of a solvent bath with soap and water, and then some degreaser is needed. Unfortunately, the bottom bracket has been worked on with a screwdriver, so I can't get the shell out. And while the spindle does spin smoothly enough, I always like to extract it first to make sure there's no corrosion that needs to be addressed. What's interesting to me about this older technology is that both the dropouts were bonded inside of hollow shafts of aluminum. You can still see a little bit of the adhesive glue sticking on both sides of the arms where the aluminum attaches to the bracket. I also discovered that the pivots for the rear shock have no spacers on either side of the eyelet, and is literally rocking back and forth almost a 1/4 inch. I'll need to have some of those custom made, or hopefully find some spare parts online so the shock is guided up and down without knocking side to side. Surprisingly though, the air shock is still holding air after almost 30 years. For some of you, this may look like some really outdated technology, But back in the day, these frames were still handcrafted here in the US, and they used some of the nicest double and triple butted aluminum at the time. So a common problem with early cantilever post brakes is that the post bolts were often over-tightened, causing the bolts to get mushroomed at the tip. Not only that, but there was a lot of corrosion after 30 years. So, besides wiping down the posts themselves with a little bit of degreaser, I went back with some 600 grit sandpaper and sanded down each of the posts to smooth out the posts and get rid of the mushroom tip. So my number one tip for people working with cantilever brakes and V-brakes is not to over-tighten the post bolts. This old 7-speed cassette was in really good shape, but was basically hand loose. So when I went to go take it off to clean it, I didn't even have to use a wrench to back off the lock nut. Here you also see me removing the original spoke guard. This is a good indication that if it's still on there, this bike has not been ridden that hard. And luckily for me, when I took off the dust covers on the hubs, all I could see was clean grease. It's not common to see a 30-year-old mountain bike to have such clean green grease in it. Either it had been serviced once before and not ridden, or had been ridden so light it didn't need to be serviced. Still, I am adjusting the hubs just to make sure they're not overly tight or loose. Hey guys, welcome back. We're here to do a little test on this Trek 9200 at one of my favorite trails here at Kelly's Canyon. Let's check it out. Well, at almost 30 years old, this bike definitely has a few rough points. The stem is 130 millimeters long, which is way too long for me. At the same time, it climbs really well, and for such a narrow handlebar at less than 600 millimeters, it definitely feels weird to get on a modern mountain bike. Still, this bike has a lot of potential, and I think I'm not done with it yet. We'll probably be swapping out the bars and the stem for the next video, and I have a couple surprises for the front end. So stay tuned for the next incarnation of this Trek 9200. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you soon.